Hey everybody, and welcome back to Super Comic Fun Times Daily Comic Book Vlog. Today we are going to talk about New Comic Book Day, which was yesterday, but I didn't make it to the store until today. So we're going to look at the books I've got. Then I'm going to talk about what I've been reading lately, since I haven't done a vlog in a couple of days. Earlier today, I finally got up my unboxing video, my Something's in the Box for Antarctic Comics, and I have had time to read My Hero Magademia, so I'll go over that and more. I've got lots of stuff to talk about today, so let's buckle in. So let's go ahead and start with what I picked up today. So I got a healthy stack. The one I was really looking forward to was The Prisoner. So The Prisoner number 2 came out yesterday, and I'll be talking about this later because I've read this one already, and that's why I put it on top of the list. So I went to the comic book store, the newer one I found that's close to where I work, and I started my first pull list today. So I can be a real fake geek guy now. I've got 2 books on my list, Venom and The Prisoner. So I'll add books as I feel like it, and we'll go from there. So the next thing I got is, like, I've been hearing a lot about the Flash War, so I got Flash number 47, where the Flash War starts, and so that'll be fun. The only Flash I've read so far is the Jeff Johns run. I have the first 2 volumes of that, which I think was it from the late 90s? Whenever it was from, it was a very good run. I enjoyed it a lot. It was the Wally West Flash. It's before Barry Allen came back into comic books. And I was really I didn't read DC Comics growing up, and I only knew the Flash first from the TV show in the 90s. And I guess I knew him a bit from the Super Friends. I think he showed up once or twice there, but he never, when I was watching it, he didn't do a whole lot that I remember. And I guess the show got better as time went on and they introduced more characters, but I was watching it in the early days and it was very tame. Then I've heard about this, and I've heard, like, there's some people that are disappointed, but for 25 cents, I got DC Nation. I've looked for this for a couple of weeks, and I just happened to find it today. And then last week I read one of the Hunt for Wolverine books, so I went and got the original one. Now I've seen other reviews, like, I really like the cover of the one I got, but the story was kind of not that great, and I didn't want to spoil that, but and so I didn't. But I've heard this is the one to get, so I guess it's kind of confusing what they're doing with this Hunt for Wolverine. At least to me, it's a little confusing. There was another. This one was on the shelf when I was there, but I wasn't sure if I should get it. I don't know how this all ties in, but I heard the Hunt for Wolverine is really good, and I did say I was going to continue with it, but if, like right now I'm just confused about exactly, like, are all of these standalone books where the story just ties in tangentially? I don't know. So I've gone up in the air with that one now too, and I might not be following that event or whatever it is. And then I picked up some, let me just see if I have any new books, more new books. And so, yeah, so then I got some older books, like I found, I guess this is being published under Justice League Essentials from Rebirth, so this was $1. So I decided to get that since, I haven't been reading new stuff, like I keep saying. I don't think I have to keep saying it. Then, of course, I got some more. There were a couple of more True Believers books. So I got Wolverine Fatal Attractions. This is a nice thick one, so it seemed like it'd probably be a good value. And then another Wolverine book, The Dying Game. They had so many of these True Believers books, but I still haven't read the 2 I got last week. So, I like the price, and I'd like to get them all, but there's other stuff out there. So then I also got these, which I'm assuming are, well, they look like Future's End tie-ins. I don't know what they are, but they had really cool covers. So let's see. I don't know how well it'll show up on the screen. I should probably use both hands. So I guess that's like, what, a lenticular cover. But when I look at it, it looks more 3D. I mean, it looks really cool. So yeah, I don't know anything about these covers. They just happen to be there. I figured they were kind of old. I don't, you know, I don't know. But they're also Future's End. And if you remember, I bought the Future's End set on Comixology, and I started to read it, but then I started getting into real world books. And then, yeah, this Superman book from Future's End. And, you know, I don't have very many gimmicky covers, so I thought I'll at least get a couple of gimmicky covers. I missed all of the gimmicky stuff when it was happening in the 90s, and except for those big blocks of comics I get from time to time from half-price books, I haven't seen very many of them. I think what I might do is, if you remember the block I opened with Chuck Dixon's Robin run, I think that was a 4-issue miniseries, so I think I'll be able to get that at this comic book store. So I might finally get around to that. And I like that one. If you remember, it had the Joker was holding kind of a base relief playing card that might have shown Robin. I forget. I'll have to dig that out. So that's my haul this week. In addition to that, you saw that if you watched the video of my unpacking, I also got these on Monday, along with My Hero Magademia. So yeah, I haven't read these yet. I just wanted to give Antarctic a try. I'd never really heard of them until the online controversy. So, you know, and so yeah, that's the haul. That's the haul for this week. So let me know what you got down below, and what was your favorite thing of the week, and did I waste my money on these fancy covers? I don't think so. I think they're kind of cool to look at. And so now I have to find the books I'm going to review for you. I think what I will start with is, you'll remember last week I found a whole bunch of books at St. Vincent de Paul's thrift shop that were for $1. And the very first books my eyes lit upon was this book called Mutantis. At first I thought it was Mutants, but it's called Mutantis. And so I decided to read this. I think I read somewhere that there was a story in Epic Illustrated that followed the same theme. And I kind of remember a story like this. They could be two totally separate ones. I could be remembering wrong. In the story I read in Epic Illustrated, I will say that that was a pretty good story. From what I recall. Now, this was kind of like at the beginning of the AIDS awareness, like people were dying, nobody knew what was going on. So this story was about this guy who is going around town assassinating his ex-lovers. And it's a science fiction story, and it turns out he's kind of like, you know, very promiscuous, and he'll sleep with anybody. And so he has a lot of partners that he has to kill, and nobody knows why he's doing it. And at the end, it's revealed it's because he was off-world and he had sex with some aliens, and he came down with an alien STD. Now, for the aliens, it was kind of mild, and they had their version of penicillin to deal with it, but he didn't know he was infected when he was spreading it. And in a human being, it kind of turns you into a monster. And so, you know, that was that story. And it kind of ended like on this, it wasn't exactly a cliffhanger. It's like at the time, there was news stories that scientists had believed that they had discovered patient zero, and he was allegedly this airline attendant who had a lot of lovers, you know, wherever the airplanes landed. So he ended up spreading the disease, according to that story. To me, I don't know if that's true. Even at the time, I thought that sounded weird. I thought there were so many stories about how AIDS got started. There was like, you know, guessing that some guy had gotten bitten by a monkey in the jungle and he started spreading it. And this one sounded like a urban legend to me too. And I really don't know if it's true. I think I've seen documentaries out there about it. I don't remember if I watched them or not. So I had some expectations for this because of that story. And like I said, that was a pretty good story. I don't remember how many pages it was, but, you know, Epic Illustrated had varying sizes. It might have only been 4 or 5 pages, but it was a very tightly told story. And I found it interesting. At the time, it was relevant. And so they decided to take this, like, probably around 10 years later. I think this came out around 92. So they decided to make this Mutantis series, which is essentially a Blade Runner ripoff, an Inkle ripoff, and it has a few other things thrown in there. It does have some nice artwork, so let's see if we can get that. I did enjoy the artwork in it. It turns out it's a story of, you see this, like, this guy drops his thermos, and this other guy named Klain saves his life. Like, you can see it here. Like, the guy's about to go off the I-beam there, and he drops his thermos reaching for it, and his friend saves his life. But it doesn't matter because there's a monster in the elevator. This elevator, they're like maintenance guys, and this elevator starts coming up, and they go, that elevator shouldn't be coming up. And then there's a monster in there, and it turns out they're both infected. And this is where it turns into Blade Runner. Is like, I guess they both survive, but they're infected. And so this Klain guy, he had been a cop at one point, and he became disgraced. And so they tell him, well, we've got a cure, but you have to go kill the 3 people that this other guy had contact with and probably infected before he fully turned. And so that's your Blade Runner element. It's like he has to kind of chase these guys down. And yeah, I would say this, and that's pretty much the story. I think he kills 2 people in this one, then he ends up getting caught. And then we're introduced to the second major character, which is a police chief in the second issue. Well, not a police chief, but a police detective. And it's weird. It's like everything in this world, like the ice caps melted and major corporations have taken over. So this is like a corporation. What was it called? It had some kind of obvious name, like Tsunami. It was called Tsunami. It's like, who names their corporation Tsunami? So they're like out on this kind of like a huge artificial city on the sea because, the earth is flooded. I guess it's a little bit like Waterworld, though this, I think, is a couple of years before Waterworld. Yeah, so I would say this story was okay. You get some background on it. It's either too short or too long. I'm not sure which. I think maybe you add another issue and you draw some things out. It's like they never really make you care about the characters. You've got all this cool lighting effects and stuff because they want to remind you of Blade Runner, but there's no real inspiration to it. At least I didn't find it. I didn't say, oh, this is a cool spin on this. It's like, there's another book that I read last week. And that was The Futurians. Well, that one was also derivative. It had some cool ideas in it. And this one, it's not, it seems like, somebody had an idea. Hey, people like that story I told in Epic 10 years ago. Why don't I try to do something with that? And Blade Runner is like this thing, it's 92. It was 10 years old, and they had re-released Blade Runner. So that might have been on people. It was on my mind. I went to see Blade Runner when it came out in 82. I went to see it again in 92 when they released the first of the director's cuts, which at the time we didn't know we were going to be getting like 5 or 6 director's cuts of that. So it was kind of cool to revisit the movie. So it makes sense why they did certain things in here to be relevant to the time, but it doesn't have the relevancy of the of the AIDS story, and they never directly referenced AIDS in the Epic Illustrated story. But if you were keeping up with the news, you know what they were talking about, and it did have some relevancy to it. And I think here it's like, I guess they're trying to be relevant with global warming and the melting of the ice caps, but AIDS is something you could have, in 1982 or whenever that story came out, you could have known somebody with AIDS. By 92, certainly you had a better chance of knowing somebody who would have been affected by it. I think they would have kept to that story a little bit more. It would have been more relevant. I don't know. This, like I say, I think it's kind of a valiant attempt, but it ultimately falls short. But it wasn't, it wasn't boring. It was well, I guess parts of it were boring, but but well, it was 3 issues. It was like this 25-year-old thing, and I found it in the thrift shop, and so that was exciting to read. I did like recognizing certain things. It just is like, I'm going to do a more full review of the Futurians. I'm not going to talk about that today, and I'm going to point out here things that were original in it, even though, as a whole, I feel it failed. But I think this, this plot element was used here 10 years later. This plot element was used like a year or two after this came out. And so that was exciting to me when I was reading it. And nothing really jumped out at me of this, of the Mutantis like that. It's like, none of the characters are really all that likable. You don't get to know about them or care about them. And I think that's probably the biggest flaw. They try some things. That's why I think maybe another issue, maybe another half issue, flesh out some of the characters, and you might have had something we might have cared. But as it is, I think this has been forgotten, and it's probably deservedly forgotten. But if you did read this back in the day, let me know. Let me know what you think. So what should we go to next? Now these are the 2 I read today, and these are like the muses that you see in Greek art. Like, you've got the comedy and the tragedy. So I don't know if I should do the tragedy first and then the comedy, or they're both good. So let's go ahead and start with the comedy. For whatever reason, I think it will, mostly because it's the order I read it. So this book is by, I should have told you who did the forgettable books, but these books were written by Andy Lanning and Dan Abnett, John Higgins on pencils, Andy Lanning on inks, Melissa DeLugneson, I can't pronounce your name, I'm sorry, Gary Gravatt, and Martin Impey on colors. Gary Gilbert was the letterer. And so, this could have used, the art is fantastic. Like, look at that cover. I really do like the art in this. It fails as a story. That's all there is to say about that. So, My Hero Magademia. Did I think I would be getting this book? I follow POTUS Thump on Twitter, and this one I was leaning towards it, but it really took the controversy that's been going on since Jawbreakers was so successful to make me act and actually get it. And I'm glad I did. This book was pure joy. It's almost like it exudes off the cover, like the way everybody's smiling. Again, it's a really funny book. I suck at telling jokes, but from the beginning, this isn't even the first page. This is the inside cover, and it's hilarious. Maybe I'll just read some of it. It's like, my fellow Americans, and those of you who aren't Americans, but that's not your fault, and it's okay. I want to start this comic by thanking you for picking it up, but when it's over, I promise you, and this is a real promise, that you will be thanking me for starring in it. It's really hilarious. I don't know. My delivery probably has much to be desired. When you're done reading it, you're going to say, wow. And when you show it to your friends, they're going to say, my mom won't let me read it because it disagrees with her. Sad. Because in this book, you're going to be reading about winning. But more importantly, you're going to be reading about America, the US of A, the country that's been so good to me and so good to you, even if you don't know it or don't live here. So this was like a great book. It starts with, a lot of these tropes. These are online tropes that I'm highly familiar with. The red pill that comes from the Matrix. If you're not engrossed in online meme culture, and I'm like on the fringes of it, but I got a lot of the jokes. The only jokes I probably didn't get is because I couldn't read the free comic book day of My Hero Academia. This almost makes me want to read it, but I think this is better. So I don't, maybe I should read the real comic book and not the free comic day comic book of My Hero Magademia. But the art is bright and cheerful. It was just a joy to read this book. I read this on the bus. I started it this morning, and I read like the first 3 pages if you count the inside cover, because I was reading other stuff before, and I finished a chapter in a different book I was reading. So I said, oh, let's try My Hero Magademia. And so it's just like hilarious. You've got the wall joke. You've got you've got those Mexican wrestlers with their masks. They're like represented as people entering the country illegally. You got, I mean, look at this. It's so much fun. I don't know how anybody could not have fun reading it. And then you have this guy whose name I can't pronounce, but like everybody has, like, even though this character clearly looks like President Trump, he's not President Trump. His name is Walmite. And this might be jokes related to the My Hero Academia, which like I kind of read. And then the young kid, like, it has these nice bios in the back, so I can just flip to the back. So his name is Mayaku Kun. And then the other main character is Flotus. So, and then you have the bad guys listed back here. Like, this book was great. You should just do yourself, if you want to laugh, you should go out and get it. If if you're not a Trump supporter and you think you hate him, read this book and see if it makes you laugh. I bet you enjoy it too. There's just so many times. If you ever seen an old Felix the Cat cartoon, one of the lyrics was, "You'll laugh so much, your sides will ache, your heart will go pitter-pat. That's for Felix, the wonderful cat." So anyways, I was laughing so hard my side did ache, and I had to go back like this and kind of massage my side because it was just so great. Oh, I didn't even notice this. I missed so much stuff. So this is probably a book I can read again. There's like POTUS stuff. There's a rabbit on the cover, but I didn't really notice them in the book, and there they are in the Oval Office. So yeah, great book, funny book, one of the best books I've ever read. Certainly the best book I've read today, and I think you're gonna love it. You'll laugh. You'll laugh so much. You'll enjoy it so much. You'll be sick of enjoying it. I think there's a joke like that in here too. So everything is like, it's hilarious. Yeah, you got to get this book just for the collectors. I was reading this, and you know how sometimes you get so elated with something, you get almost kind of drunk. And I was like thinking, how do we get Tim Lim and his team? This book is by Tim Lim, Mark Pellegrini, Brett R. Smith, and Austin Rogers. And so, like, what is it called? The Freedom of Metal, the Medal of Freedom. When I get in front of the camera, my brain gets scrambled. But I was like thinking, like, how do we get the Medal of Freedom for these people? It'd be so great. I think President Trump needs to read this book. He would have a blast. Oh my God! Highlight of the day, and it was a day full of highlights. So yeah, you got to get this book. Highest recommendation. So 5 stars plus 1. And we're going to put this aside now, and we're going to go to the tragedy. You can't. One of my favorite movies is Vanilla Sky, and there's that guy in there who's Tom Cruise's friend. He's go, you got to have the sour and the sweet, baby, or whatever he says. So we had the sweet first, and I prefer that because sweet is sometimes too much for me. So you want a little bitterness to wipe it down. Now, if you remember my review of Prisoner Part 1, is like, I was of the opinion it was just okay. This is much better. This is something that's acceptable to me as a Prisoner fan. And I would almost say if you didn't pick up issue 1, if you're a completist, you should get it. But I think you could almost start here. Here you've got this little recap here of what happened, and that's all you need. Just this should be the one that's the collector's item. It should be like, Prisoner 1 is like, it's all like building up the main character, which I guess in a sense you want. But this scene here, this first page here, you have a boy and his dog, and something terrible happens, and that hooks me into the character better than anything the whole first book did. The first book had some interesting art and whatnot, but I think well, I'm not a great art critic, but I would say I enjoyed the art a lot more in this one. Here you've got some surreal things. You know, this guy on a penny farthing bicycle, that's something like you might see in the original print Prisoner. And so, yeah, this is a great book. So if you're holding off to know if there is going to be any value here at all, this, you know, this makes up for issue 1 in spades. Now, yeah, and even though it's got like a lot of things that are from the original show, it does have a twist on it. So, so yeah, you know, essentially it's like the original show. Like in a lot of shows, the prisoner would try to escape, and it would be a failed attempt. This one ends on a cliffhanger. And so, you know, spoilers. If you want to read this book, I recommend reading this book. I'm just going to like talk about it. So it turns out like in the first book, the guy, he ends up in an isolated cabin, you know, at one of his safe houses, but he's pretty sure the village knows about him, and he orders a pizza, and they drug the pizza. But at the same time they drug the pizza, they send the guy to put the gas under the door, like in the opening of the original show. It was kind of a mess. I mean, but in this one, we don't even, you know, like that book ended with, you know, the scene of Port Merion where the prisoner was shot. And that was all you really got at the village in this one. This one you get, this one is great on characters. I mean, that one might have had like a lot of characters in it, but this one is like, the village is truly just the backdrop here because, you know, you've got 3 main characters. You've got, what's his name, and what's her name? Let's see. So you've got Breen, who is like the main character. Carrie, who's the love interest, which, you know, at first I'm like, a love interest in the prisoner? I don't know about that, because Patrick McGoohan really never wanted to have a love interest. The closest he got was the girl that he had a psychic link with, a simpatico, and because, you know, he was a very strict Catholic, and he said, "I do not wish to kiss a woman who isn't my wife." And so that's why he never really, even though he was kind of an action star, danger man, even The Prisoner has a bit of action to it. He's never like the ladies' man, because he didn't want to violate his marriage vows even as an actor. So that's kind of cool. And then like the third main character is a section chief. So like here's Carrie's entrance, and you know, this one I think it's a little muddy. I think this more dramatic, but it's not quite there. But like I say, this book has so much good stuff in it, I can kind of forgive all of that. You have the village kind of controlling time. Like they go back to, like, you know, we find out this whole thing was a plot hatched, and they kind of put a little nuggets of that in the first book, but they made it seem like Breen had just quit. And so, you know, they go on this chase. You know, this is kind of cool. You know, I mean, the running scene, I kind of like that. Again, it's like the story. Then you have like the Harry Potter bus comes to pick him up. And like one thing is Breen has a tracking device in his ribs, and if he tries to remove it, it's going to blow up. So there's a little bit of a plot hole there, because why don't they just say, well, if you try to, you know, if you step outside the village, you'll blow up. So anyways, but then the village just always messes with you. It's kind of like the Marquis de Sade. Like he had some weird book where you get a prisoner to accept the state of their imprisonment by allowing them to escape, but then showing them it's futile. And that's what you get here. You get Rover in here. Like the previous issue, they had Breen being covered by Rover on the cover. That never happened in the book. There's very little village in the book, except, you know, they talk about them, and the village seems to be like almost a spy organization where they steal great relics, and then they brag about it by putting a V. If you remember me talking about that. I almost don't. I mean, I was always going to get this book anyways, because it's one of my favorite TV shows, but and it's only 6 issues. So I was planning on sticking it out no matter what. But this issue really made sticking it out make it seem like it's going to work much better. So, anyways, again, like I told you, this is spoilers. So it ends with our main character committing suicide. So we know this is going to be some kind of, he's going to come back in the next issue. And I would be very surprised if he didn't. If he didn't, that could be awesome. I mean, that would just play against my expectations. But yeah, they haven't really set anybody up. I guess Carrie could take over, but she seems to. It's a little confusing. So yeah, so this is going to be the cover of issue 3. And so that's another thing is people who. So yeah, that'll be on sale in June, probably the end of June. It doesn't give the week it's coming out. Yeah, I mean, I would like to get all of the covers, the variant covers with Patrick McGoohan on it. But I think I didn't know what this was going to be at first. I thought it was going to be because in 1987, DC Comics did an authorized sequel to the Prisoner. And so I thought it's possible they're going to use that same character. And he could show up. I doubt it. I think it's in real time. And Patrick McGoohan died in, was it 2000? 2003 maybe, and so I think they're not going to try to stretch his character out. They do repeat some plots from the TV show. So yeah, but anyways, yeah, enjoyed this issue. It was much grimmer. I didn't laugh once during this one, but I wasn't really bored by it either. Looking at it again while I'm talking to you, I guess the artwork does have some things to be desired, but if I get sucked into the story, then the artwork is just, it's fine. It's really good artwork can save kind of a mediocre story, but it did its job in this issue. So yeah, I think that is going to do it for this episode. I'll read some more stuff over the coming days. Now we're heading into a 3-day weekend, so weekends I have to do a lot of work around the house and whatnot, and then we're going up to Spring Green for Bob Fest on Sunday, and maybe I'll be able to get a video out on Monday. I don't know. I'm just going to play it by ear. So, have a great holiday. Oh, excuse me. Have a great Memorial Day weekend if you're American, and if you're watching from any place else in the world, that would be really awesome. Tell me down below. And tell me what you got this week. Tell me what your favorite book is. Tell me when you first did your first pull list. Was it something maybe you're way younger than me? Maybe your dad was into comics and he taught you how to do that. It's there really were no comic books shops. It's I went to the Walgreens or the grocery store, and that's where I got my comics from. So anyways, yeah, I'm going to end it there. Please hit the like button, subscribe, and comment down below. What was your favorite thing released today? Should I stick it out with the Wolverine books? What do you think of The Prisoner? Have you read it? Have I convinced you to buy it? Have you read My Hero Magademia? And if you're not a Trump supporter, what do you think of the book? I thought it was funny. I thought it was awesome. So I'd like to know what you think. And super comic fun time out.